Alright, so what I'm going to attempt to do is go on fanfiction.net and try to read the most favorited fanfictions from each game there. I'm starting off with Sonic because everyone loves Sonic. This will probably fail in the end, but whatever. Without further ado, He is My Master by Chiisai Kitsune. This is going to be a train wreck. Chapter 1, Chaos Control Freaks. The blue body writhed, its back arching in pain, but still his captor would grant him no release. Shadow, Blackfur, son of the king, brought his crop down hard. The slave cried out. But while the other three attending the anthropomorphic statements were either wearing expressions of boredom or smug satisfaction as they watched the punishment carry out in the dungeon, neither slave nor master seemed to be enjoying it much. Shadow lashed out at the unprotected back once more, the whimpering of the other not able to sway him. His slave was trapped in a sort of pillory, which left him standing in the ground, bent forward with both his hands and neck locked in the wooden contraption at chest height, behind exposed in this humiliating position. Not broken, already obedient most of the time, but still not completely broken.
"Master, please,"
he begged, squirming in the tight hold of the wood, anything to get away from the beating. Shadow scowled before hitting the slave again, impassive against the yelp and this pulled forth. It went against his grain to hurt something so pretty, but unfortunately, it just couldn't be helped.
"Please, no more!"
The other attendants sighed into each other. It had been months since the slave had been brought into the castle. The king bought it for Shadow, who had been trying to break the blue hedgehog down for his father's standards ever since. In this realm, slaves were not just obedient, but utterly broken. It was fairly easy to accomplish that with newborns. Newborns who had never known anything else, but wilds like this one were harder. Shadow was still laying into the blue hedgehog, his strokes calm, clean, with pauses in between. The slave was openly crying now, and the atmosphere between the grey cat servant and the bulldog dungeon master, who were leaning against the wall, became vaguely hopeful. Perhaps they would be out of there soon? The purple lizard who held the whips, bandages, and collar next to Prince Shadow just looked on impassively, as reptiles are prone to do. He didn't notice the mixture of anger and pity in Shadow's eyes, and neither did anyone else as the black hedgehog raised his hand for the final lash above the trembling, tied body. Meanwhile, in a strange foreign land called Canon, into which Sonado writers hardly ever set foot in, because neither Shadow is a kinky vampire, nor is Sonic willing to carry his baby. Things are entirely different. However,
"Hey, Shadow, what's up with your speed? Guarantee on your skates run out?"
Okay. The addressed black hedgehog only snarled viciously in response. Annoyed beyond measure by the carefree, laughing blue prankster, he forced his body to work harder and pour out the chaos energy into his shoes, which blazed brightly and propelled him forward to draw level with Sonic again, who grinned.
"Thought you'd never catch up. Enjoying the race so far?"
The blue hedgehog said flippantly, yet Shadow was satisfied to hear that even underneath the cocky speech, the breathing of the blue hedgehog was becoming slightly more labored.
"Shut it, faker. I want my emerald back." "I know, that's why I borrowed it after all."
Sonic laughed and jumped across a log that barred their way. In the dry, grassy landscape they were dashing through, and Shadow followed just a split second after. I know, and that's why I'll kill you as soon as I have my hands on it," the black hedgehog shot back, trying to impale Sonic in front of him with a death glare instead of a chaos sphere. Sadly, it wasn't as effective, and again, the movement of Sonic as he watched him run entranced him, threatening to make him lose focus, and,
"God damn it!"
Shadow cursed as he nearly tripped over a root, which could break bones at the speed they were going.
"This is all that blue idiot's fault."
Sonic had been the one who wanted the race. Shadow had been the one who threatened to tie his tail to his snout if he asked one more time. And then Sonic had the bright idea to steal Shadow's Chaos Emerald, because there's nothing like a little blackmail to get others to go along with your plans.
"What's the matter, Shads? Need a hand?"
His rival called out over his shoulder, not slowing down.
You will need a blood transfusion soon.
The black hedgehog grumbled under his breath, concentrating on skating. Sonic had hidden the damn emerald somewhere in the near wilderness, then come back to challenge Shadow to a race if he wanted his gem back. The ultimate life form had no other choice but to beat Sonic to it, which was exactly what the blue hedgehog had been after in the first place. Well, at least his rival had the decency to mark the racetrack so Shadow would know where to run, even if he overtook Sonic, which still wouldn't save him from a serious thrashing as soon as I got my property back, Shadow thought grimly. All the black hedgehog had wanted was a quiet existence as a wanderer in between Club Rouge and the Ark. He had no desire to be anywhere near Sonic, because that blue hedgehog lately made him feel rather odd. Shadow furiously shook his head as he could sense a heat creeping up his face, and with a final burst of speed, dashed past Sonic, shoving the hedgehog in the process, who yelped but caught himself in time.
Hey, no fair! Life isn't fair, get used to it,
Shadow called back, which only elicited an excited grin from Sonic, who could feel banter coming up. What's wrong with me? Wondered the black hedgehog, irritated by both his body's irrational behavior and Sonic's oblivious attitude.
Final stretch of the road, here goes nothing!
Suddenly came a shout from behind, and Sonic, with gritted teeth and shining eyes, pulled even. In the distance, carefully positioned on a rock in the middle of the barren plain, lay the transparent Chaos Emerald. Now the race was truly on. Blue legs were a blur, skates scorched the ground aflame. Shadow spin-dashed, Sonic dodged, laughed, and still nobody was in the lead. The emerald was drawing ever closer, the ground eaten up behind their feet. Shadow's attack could have easily sliced Sonic in half, but it took more than that to intimidate the blue hero. He loved the challenge, and besides, the spin dash had been shoddily aimed anyway. Shadow was scowling at himself. Why hadn't he attacked Sonic for real? He was angry at him. He yearned to lay hand on that blue body, but somehow he hadn't been able to truly.
Forget about it. As soon as I touch that emerald, I'll chaos control out of here and to the Ark. Having to run all the way home when he's already tired should be punishment enough for the faker. As it was, while both the hedgehogs were similarly exhausted, only when looking at Sonic was it obvious. His fur was starting to mat with sweat, and his quills were rumpled and tossed about by the winds, which was exactly how Sonic liked it. He pushed his body to the limit, running alongside Shadow toward the stone. His plan was simple. As soon as his fingertips were brushing against the emerald, he'd chaos control away, hiding it somewhere else, and challenge that Shadow to another race. Granted, it would probably end up being a brawl instead of a race, because the other would be positively livid, but that would be fine with Sonic. He just liked matching himself against his rival in speed. Both hedgehogs accelerated, their breathing fast, their eyes turned on the gem, their two gloved hands stretched forward, nearly touching. Chaos control! Something, somewhere, went horribly wrong. Sonic knew it as soon as the chaos control had activated, because it at once drained him of nearly all his power. He gasped as his breath was driven out of his lungs, struggling against the urge to faint. He dimly thought he sensed Shadow next to him doing the same, but couldn't see a thing as they were encased by light so bright it was blinding. What was happening? The last thing Sonic remembered was grasping the emerald, but at the same time as Shadow, and both of them had yelled at the command to teleport. Yeah, trying to warp to two different places at once with the same emerald probably was a really bad idea,
shot through the blue hedgehog's head. He had wanted to chaos control the Tails workshop, but had no idea what place Shadow had in mind. Usually he could tell
Usually he could tell the distance of a teleport, judging by the amount of effort it required, and right now it felt as if he were trying to jump to the other side of the galaxy. Sonic was growing dizzy, disoriented and faint, and just wished for the whole rainbow ride around him to stop so he could get off, when suddenly the world reappeared. But, as had said before, it reappeared somehow, somewhere, terribly wrong. For the blue hedgehog, it was as if a sensation of movement had suddenly stopped, and he was slumped against something that settled as an uncomfortable and snaring thing around his wrists and neck. Sonic's legs nearly buckled underneath him as they were suddenly forced to hold his body up again. The blue hero managed to catch himself just in time, but when he noticed that he couldn't upright himself, since he was bent forward and somehow encased in, a sharp pain exploded on his backside. Ow, what the? Things that are in motion tend to stay in motion, important for science classes, and also if you had just arrived at some odd medieval dungeon you had never intended to go. Shadow blinked. Then he stared at his hand, that for some reason holding something resembling a riding crop, and stared at the blue behind he had just struck. What?
This should be enough for today, my prince. You do not look very well, I may say so.
A purple lizard addressed Shadow, who stared at him, clueless. Realizing he was talking to him, Shadow slowly nodded. He wasn't feeling very well. Was he hallucinating?
Hey, you, get me out of here.
Okay, scratch that. There was no way in hell a hallucination could sound that realistic. In front of him, I think that was Sonic. In front of him, the tail behind of what seemed to belong to Sonic was now wriggling. The blue hedgehog appeared to be trapped in some kind of pillory.
Excuse me, Prince,
the lizard lisped once again, taking the crop out of Shadow's unresisting hand and lashed out at the blue hedgehog's back, adding a second bruise.
You do not speak unless spoken to, slave.
Sonic yelped as he was struck, probably more from surprise than pain, and abruptly fell silent. A sigh came from the right, and Shadow's head turned, seeing a grey cat in a light blue tunic dislodged himself from the dungeon wall, striding over to the lizard and taking a red collar from his hands. The black hedgehog was still trying to understand the whole situation and just watched as the cat walked around Sonic's head, unfastening the choker, then snapping it shut around the blue hedgehog's neck. A leash followed suit, and the bulldog, fifth and last Mobian, was he still in Mobius? Took a key from his pocket, opening the pillory so Sonic could stand up properly. The blue hedgehog thought he couldn't believe this. They had just addressed him as slave, and he pushed himself upright with one hand bracing against a wound, then disbelievably grabbed at the leash that the grey hat was patiently holding him with the other hand. Another sharp pain quickly discouraged this, as the lizard had lashed out with the crop again, but this time it wasn't as bad since his glove took the worst of the hit. Nevertheless, immediately snarled at the purple creature, who looked ever so smug and sharp, with his thin black mustache and yellow slit purple pupil eyes. The other gave him a stare of distaste.
Gloveless, you have already fitting him with clothing, my prince?
Shadow spun around. The sight of Sonic on a leash had been so odd. He had been just staring for the past few moments, then, regaining his usual scowl, as a sort of protective, all-purpose mask, he quickly nodded. Yes, I did, and hoped everyone who wasn't listening that this was the right answer. The lizard wrinkled his little snout a little, but didn't comment.
Very well, I think you should take your slave to your father now. Perhaps we have made a little progress today, though I personally doubt it.
The purple reptile started to lead the way to the door, and the cat made to follow. the process, he yanked at Sonic's leash, who hadn't reacted immediately, never having been collared before. Sonic's first reaction was to shoot some angry comment, but just checked himself. He had been lashed for talking and for just touching the leash in the last 10 minutes. As long as he had no idea what was going on, starting a fight may not be that smart, especially since he was starting to feel weak from that freaky Chaos Emerald. Where had it taken him? Some weird alternate dimension? At least it seemed that way. He took a forced step forward as he pulled on the leash. Grew stronger. Then, for the first time, looked at Shadow and stared. The black hedgehog seemed just as confused as him. Was he, too?
Would you like to accompany us, my prince?
The nasal voice of the lizard came again, and Shadow's first reaction was to follow the small procession.
Shadow?
Sonic mouthed the name instead of saying it out loud, but stared at the black hedgehog intently, searching his red eyes for any hint that this was the same Shadow he had just raced for the white emerald. The tugging of the leash was a constant annoyance, so he would have to break eye contact soon. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ultimate lifeform gave the tiniest of nods. Sonic, he mouthed back. The blue hero felt a wave of relief. Wherever the chaos control had gone haywire had sent him, at least Shadow had come with him. The bulldog jailer opened the door, and all four of them strode out, Sonic feeling completely absurd with the leash around his neck. A line from an old human movie played in his head, and had the lizard not glanced at him venomously this very moment, Sonic probably would have said it, just as a joke to lighten the tension.
Shadow, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore.
Wow. The fact that this is the most favorited in all of this site just speaks droves about the internet. Well, that was the end of the first chapter. If you liked it, just tell me if you want any more, and maybe, or I could kill myself. But, whatever. Just, bye.